Hi. It is such a pleasure to see you all here tonight. Welcome to the 4th annual AI Now Symposium. We made it to 4, Meredith. It's incredible. So, my name is Crawford, and I'm standing next to my co-founder at AI Now, Meredith Whittaker. And this is basically our biggest show of the year. This is when we assess the social, cultural, and political contexts of AI, and what that might mean now and in the future. Now, last year, we focused on AI's accountability gap, as we call it, and we reviewed a year of scandals and failures, some of which had some profound national and international consequences, starting with Cambridge Analytica. What was clear was that the lack of accountability was a real and substantial problem, and change was urgently needed. So for this year, we're going to bring you the latest in terms of the multiple interventions coming from workers, community groups, researchers, and some politicians. We have a stellar lineup tonight with incredible panels. They're going to address issues like the police use of AI, facial recognition, major lawsuits against algorithmic systems, and labor organizing in tech. Now, our speakers are going to be revealing the latest forms of opposition to centralized and unaccountable forms of tech-driven power. And, happily, they're beginning to have an impact. So within the dark timeline of 2019, there are real moments of progress. And that is what we're going to be focusing on tonight. So over to you, Meredith.
So let's zoom in on facial recognition. Because this year, companies and governments ramped up the rollout of facial recognition in public housing and hiring and city streets. Some US airlines are now even using facial recognition instead of boarding passes. They say it's convenient. This includes affect recognition, which is a subset of facial recognition that claims to be able to read our inner emotions by interpreting the micro expressions on our face. But as psychologist Lisa Feldman-Barrett showed in an extensive survey paper that looked at all available evidence, this type of AI phrenology has no reliable scientific foundation, period. But it's already being used in classrooms and job interviews, and this is usually happening without people's knowledge. For example, documents obtained by the Georgetown Center on Privacy and Technology revealed that the FBI and ICE had been quietly accessing driver's license database. They're conducting facial recognition searches on millions of photos without the consent of individuals or authorization from state and federal lawmakers. But this year, following calls to severely limit the use of facial recognition from scholars and organizers like Crawford at the ACLU, Evan Selinger, and Woody Herzog, voters and legislators started doing something about it. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently ruled that Facebook could be sued for applying facial recognition to users' photos without consent. They called it an invasion of privacy. San Francisco signed the first facial recognition ban into law in May, thanks to a campaign led by groups like Media Justice. This was followed by 3 more cities, and now there's a presidential candidate promising a nationwide ban. Major musicians are demanding to cancel facial recognition at music festivals, and there's a federal bill called the No Biometric Barriers to Housing Act, targeting facial recognition in public housing. Pushback is also happening in Europe. A UK parliamentary committee called for trials of facial recognition to be stopped until a legal framework is established. And a test of these tools by police in Brussels was recently found to be unlawful. But of course, these changes take a lot of work. And we're honored to have organizers Trenae Moran and Fabian Rogers from the Ocean Hill-Brownsville neighborhood with us tonight. They are leaders in their tenants association, and they worked with Mona Patel of Brooklyn Legal Aid to oppose their landlord's attempt to install facial recognition entry system in their building. Their work is informing new federal regulation. But let's be clear, this is not a question of needing to perfect the technical side or of ironing out issues of bias. Even perfectly accurate facial recognition will produce disparate harms, given the racial and income-based disparities of who gets surveilled, tracked, and arrested. Or, as Kate recently wrote in Nature, debiasing these systems is not the point. They're dangerous when they fail, and they're harmful when they work.
And one of the other things that's been really good to see this year is this shift away from a narrow focus on technical debiasing of AI towards a more substantive focus on justice. And this has in part been driven by the fact we've had so many troubling examples. Take this one, for example. Former Governor Rick Snyder of Michigan, also a former tech executive, and the person who presided over the Flint water crisis. He decided to install a statewide automated decision system called Midas. Now, Midas was designed to automatically flag workers suspected of benefits fraud. And, of course, they decided to cut costs by firing the entire fraud detection division. Turns out, though, that the Midas system was wrong 93% of the time. I kid you not. It falsely accused initially 20,000 residents. That number has now gone over 40,000, prompting many bankruptcies and even suicides. But Midas was just one part of a larger set of austerity policies focused on scapegoating the poor. So we are particularly honored to have Jennifer Lord with us tonight. She is the civil rights attorney who sued on behalf of the people whose lives were upended by the Midas system. She fought the Midas case all the way up to the Michigan Supreme Court. But at every step of the way, she faced political resistance. And tonight, she's going to give us the full map of why this is a much more complex problem than just a failed technical system. These issues are always much deeper than just code and data. Another example comes from AI Now's own Rashida Richardson, who led a research project examining the connection between everyday police work and predictive policing systems. Her and her team found that many police departments across the US are actually using tainted records that come from racist and corrupt policing that are then feeding into predictive policing systems. Now, clearly, correcting for bias in a case like this isn't going to be a matter of removing a variable from your data set. It actually requires changing police practices that make this data to begin with. And this is something that the researcher Christiane Lum of the Human Rights Data Analysis Group has shown in her groundbreaking work on why algorithms can amplify discrimination in policing. So we're particularly delighted that she's also going to be joining us here tonight. Now, on the same panel, we have Ruha Benjamin of Princeton University, who recently dropped these two books just this year called Race After Technology and the edited collection Captivating Technology, clearly an overachiever. Alongside scholars like Dorothy Roberts and Alondra Nelson, she powerfully examines the politics of classification and how race is used to justify social hierarchies and how these logics are now feeding into AI. It's going to be an amazing discussion tonight.
Kate and Trevor Paglin also interrogated the politics of classification recently in their Training Humans show, which was the first major art exhibition that looked at the training data used to create machine learning systems. The show examines the history and logics of AI training sets, from the first experiments in 1963 by Woody Bledsoe, through to the most well-known and well-used benchmark sets like Labeled Faces in the Wild and ImageNet. Now, ImageNet Roulette is a video installation, an app that accompanied their show. You may have seen it when it went viral last month after millions of people uploaded their photos wondering how they would be classified by ImageNet. And this is actually a question with significant implications because ImageNet is the canonical object recognition dataset. It has done more than any other to shape the AI field. So here's an idea. Kate, I thought I'd run a picture of us through ImageNet Roulette.
Uh-oh.
And there's never a good time to tell you, but you are a newsreader, and my passion is welding.
At least it's good to know.
Yeah, therapy works. But some description.
This is a good one.
We chose a couple of hilarious examples because this is a family show. But some descriptions are a lot less amusing. ImageNet is filled with extremely problematic classifications, and many of them are flatly racist and misogynist. So ImageNet Roulette provided an interface for people to really see how AI systems classify them, exposing the thin and highly stereotyped categories they apply to our complex and dynamic world. This is another reason why art and research together can sometimes have more of an impact than either alone, making us consider who gets to define the categories we're put into, and with what consequences.
So these issues of power, classification, and control are at the foreground of the large-scale rollout of corporate surveillance systems across the US this year. Take Amazon Ring. This is a surveillance video camera and doorbell system that is designed so that people can have 24/7 CCTV video footage of their homes and also their neighborhoods. Now, it's just been revealed that Amazon is partnering with over 400 police departments across the country, but they're also asking police to convince residents to buy the system, which, if you think about it, is a little bit like turning cops into door-to-door surveillance salespeople. But as part of the deal, Amazon gets ongoing access to video footage, and police get access to this. This is an online portal of Ring videos that they can use whenever they want. No subpoena necessary. So the company has already filed a patent for facial recognition in this space, indicating that they would like the ability to compare subjects on camera with a database of suspicious persons, effectively creating a nationwide surveillance system of homes across the country. But Ring is just one part of a much bigger problem. As academics like Berku Baykart, Molly Sauter, and AI Now fellow Ben Green have shown, this techno-utopian rhetoric of smart cities is hiding much deeper issues of inequality. And now communities are actually starting to take this on. In San Diego, residents protested the installation of 12,000 facial recognition light pole cameras at exactly the same time as Hong Kong protesters were pulling down their own so-called smart lamp posts and also using lasers and gas masks to try and confound surveillance cameras. And in June this year, students and parents in Lockport, New York, protested against a facial recognition system in the school that would have given the district the ability to track and map any student or teacher at any time. The district actually decided to pause this effort after the protests. Now, building on the fights against tech companies reshaping cities, from Sidewalk Toronto's waterfront project to Google's expansion into San Jose, researchers and activists are showing these connections between tech, infrastructure, and gentrification. And this picture behind me comes from the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project. It's led by AI Now postdoc Erin McElroy, and she's been documenting this for years. And of course, in February, right here in New York, a large coalition pushed Amazon to abandon its second headquarters in Queens. Now, leaked comments from an Amazon executive revealed that they were particularly worried that the protesters would start linking these issues around real estate to their labor practices and to their contracts with ICE. So it's another reminder of why these are multi-issue campaigns, particularly given that tech companies have interests across so many different sectors. Now, one of the most unaccountable and abusive contexts for these tools is, of course, at the US southern border, where AI systems are currently being deployed by ICE and Custom and Border Patrol. Right now, there are 52,000 immigrants confined in jails, prisons, and other forms of detention, with another 40,000 homeless on the Mexico side of the border, waiting to make their asylum cases. Already, 7 children have died in ICE custody. It's hard to overstate the horror of what is happening there right now. But thanks to a major report by the advocacy organization Mahente, we know that companies like Amazon and Palantir are providing the engine for ICE's deportation. But people are pushing back. Already, over 2,000 engineering students from dozens of universities have signed a public pledge not to work with Palantir, and there have been near weekly protests at the head offices of tech companies. So, this means we're particularly honored tonight to have Mahente's executive director, Marissa Franco, who is behind this report, and she's a leader in the No Tech for ICE movement.
Of course, problems with structural discrimination along lines of race, class, and gender are on full display when we examine the AI field's growing diversity problem. In April, AI Now published Discriminating Systems, research led by AI Now postdoc Sarah Myers-West. This showed a feedback loop between the discriminatory culture in AI and the bias and skews embedded in AI systems. And the findings were alarming. Just as the AI industry established itself as a nexus of wealth and power, it became more male and more homogenous. There's clearly a pervasive problem across the field. And there's also growing calls for pushback. Whistleblower Sinead Swenson and journalist Ronan Farrow helped reveal a fundraising culture at NYU, at jokes on us.
MIT,
I love NYU. It's at MIT that this fundraising culture
Good catch.
puts status and money. So sorry, Katie, the provost. I'm going to rewind that and say whistleblower Sinead Swenson and journalist Ronan Farrow helped reveal a fundraising culture at MIT that put status and money above the safety of women and girls. One of the first people to call for accountability was Kenyan graduate student Arwa Mboya. Her call for justice fit a familiar pattern in which women of color without much institutional power are the first to speak up. But of course, MIT isn't alone. We've seen a series of walkouts and protests across multiple tech companies, from the Google walkout to Riot Games to Microsoft workers confronting their CEO, demanding an end to racial and gender inequity at work. And as you may have heard, I left Google earlier this year. Let's just say I became increasingly alarmed by the direction of the industry. Things were getting worse, not better, and the stakes, as you all know, are extremely high. So a few years ago, my colleagues and I started organizing around harmful uses of AI and abuses in the workplace. We were taking a page from teachers' unions and others who've used their collective power to bargain for the common good. This work was also informed by our research and the scholarship of so many others that served as an invaluable guide to political action and organizing. And along the way, we had some major wins. The tech movement grew, and we had some experiences that highlighted the kind of opposition those who speak up often face. Now, happily, I am now part of AI Now, full-time.
Woo!
It was a long year.
Oh yeah.
Now, contract workers are a crucial part of this story. And in many, many ways, they carve the path. They make up more than half the workforce at many, many tech companies, and they don't get the full protections of employment, often earning barely enough to get by and laboring on the sidelines of industry. Work from scholars like Lilia Rani, Sarah Roberts, Jessica Bruder, and Mary Gray, among many others, help draw attention to these shadow workforces. Now, AI platforms used for worker management are also a growing problem. From Uber to Amazon warehouses and well beyond, these massive automated platforms direct worker behavior, they set performance targets, and they determine wages, giving workers very little control. Now, earlier this year, for example, Uber slashed worker pay without explanation or warning, just quietly implementing a change via an update to their platform. Poof, you make 25% less. Meanwhile, drivers for delivery company DoorDash revealed that the company was quite literally stealing the tips customers thought they left for them in the app. But happily, we've also seen some big wins for these same workers. Rideshare workers in California had an enormous victory with the AB5 law, which requires app-based companies to provide drivers the full protections of employment. It's a monumental change from the status quo, and to discuss this significant moment, Professor Veena Dubal is joining us tonight. She's a leading academic studying the gig economy, and she's worked with drivers and activists for years. Now, on the East Coast, Bhairavi Desai heads the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. This is a union she founded in 1998 that now has over 21,000 members. And Bhairavi led one of the first campaigns to win against rideshare companies, and she's going to discuss that work with us tonight. Now, finally, we're honored to have Abdi Muzey on the same panel. He's the executive director of the Awood Center outside of Minneapolis. He's a veteran labor organizer who worked with Amazon warehouse workers in his community to bring this famously resistant company to the table and to get concessions that improve their lives. So it's going to be an amazing panel.
And of course, the backdrop to all of this is the climate, because planetary computation is starting to have real planetary impacts. Now, AI is very energy intensive, and it uses a huge amount of natural resources. The researcher Emma Strubel from Amherst dropped this shocking new paper this year that revealed the carbon footprint of training an AI system. Her team showed that to create just one AI model for a natural language processing system can emit as much as 600,000 pounds of carbon dioxide. So to give you some context, that's about the same amount as 125 round-trip flights between New York and Beijing. So the carbon footprint of large-scale AI is often hidden behind abstractions like the cloud. But in reality, this type of computational infrastructure is currently estimated to emit more carbon than the entire aviation industry. That is a dramatic percentage of global emissions. But here too, we're starting to see growing opposition. Just this month, we saw the first ever cross-sectoral worker action in tech, where tech workers committed to strike for the climate. They demanded zero carbon emissions from big tech by 2030, zero contracts with fossil fuel companies, and for companies not to deploy their technology in ways that will harm climate refugees. And here you can start to see the connections between the use of AI at the border and the movement for climate justice. These are deeply interconnected issues, as you're going to be seeing on stage tonight. So let's close it out by looking at the full visual timeline of this year and bringing all of these themes together.
So you can see, no doubt, there's a growing wave of pushback emerging, from rejecting the idea that facial recognition is inevitable, to tracing tech power across spaces in our homes and cities. An enormous amount of significant work is underway. And it's clear that the problems raised by AI are social, cultural, and political, as opposed to primarily technical. And these social and political issues, from criminal justice to worker rights to racial and gender equity, have a long and unbroken history. So those of us concerned with the implications of AI need to seek out and amplify the people already doing this work, and learn the histories and practices of those who've led the way. Now, the pushback that defined 2019 reminds us that there is still a window of opportunity to decide what types of AI are acceptable and how to make them accountable. And the people you'll hear from on stage tonight are on the front lines of creating this real change, researching, organizing, and pushing back across multiple domains. They share a common commitment to justice and a willingness to look beyond the hype and ask who benefits from AI, who is harmed, and who gets to decide. So with that, we're delighted to kick off the symposium with our first panel on AI and the police state. This will be chaired by AI Now's incoming executive director, Andrea Nils-Sanchez, and we could not be more delighted to introduce her to you and to have such a brilliant lawyer, strategist, and advocate for immigrant rights on our team. So please make her welcome, and let's start the show.